I do want to wish a happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers in the room. I think I've gotten to say that to a lot of you. And I also need to apologize to you because, as you might have seen from the reading of our word this morning, this isn't the most cheerful passage on Mother's Day. And that's kind of the nature of preaching through books of the Bible is I don't necessarily get to decide what we preach on which days. This is just where God has led us today as we've been going through the book of Habakkuk, and this is kind of the passage that he's given us to walk through. And so we've been going through this book. I think this is week 4 or 5 now. It is a shorter book. We only have a few weeks left, and we've kind of been seeing, again, Habakkuk has come to God because there's been lots of injustice going on around him. And he's like, God, are you going to do something about this? Like, are you going to just stand idly by and do nothing? Like, please, God, you need to come in, you need to do something. And he asks and he asks and he asks. And finally, God comes to Habakkuk, right? And we see this back and forth conversation between Habakkuk and God. And God comes to Habakkuk and he says, all right, I hear you. I'm going to do something. I'm going to take care of the injustice for you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to send the Babylonians and just have them take you guys out. Because if you guys aren't around anymore, then there's nobody left to commit any injustice, right? And so you're crying out about all this unfairness, and so problem solved, the Babylonians will come, they'll take you guys out, no more injustice. And Habakkuk kind of hears that, and he's like, what? Like, how can that be the solution? How can the Babylonians coming possibly be the right solution? Again, not that we don't deserve punishment, not that there's not some consequences that we deserve for our part in what we've done, but they're worse than we are. The Babylonians are worse than we are. And God, how can you possibly, in all of your goodness and all of your holiness and all of your purity and your pure, how can you align yourselves with them and use them to take us out? Shouldn't they be the ones getting judged more than we are? And so then God, last week we saw God kind of comes back to Habakkuk, and again, Habakkuk is waiting. He's waiting for God to respond, waiting for God to answer. Help me make sense of this, God. How in the world could you possibly use the Babylonians? What possibly could be your good in this? And last week God comes to Habakkuk and God just said, you just got to wait. Just wait. I'm not going to give you the answers yet. You got to wait, and you've got to trust in me. You've got to live your life by faith, just trusting that my plan is good, my purposes are good, and that I'm doing all of these things for my glory. And so what we see in our passage today is God's actually going to continue. This is still God talking. This is kind of the longest part, the longest speech in the book of Habakkuk. And God is going to continue responding, and he's essentially going to say, look, I know that Babylon needs to be judged. I know that Babylon deserves to be judged. I know that they are wicked. And we even kind of see this in verse 5 a little bit. Moreover, wine betrays. An arrogant man is never at rest. He enlarges his appetite like Sheol, and like death he is never satisfied. He's essentially saying, look, I know Babylon, they've kind of become intoxicated. They've become drunk on their own pride and their own appetite for power. They're never satisfied. They always need more. They've got no self-control, and they're not going to stop until they've destroyed everything in their path. They just want more. They want anyone and everyone that they can set their eyes on, including you guys, including Judah. They are coming for you. And again, God's already told Habakkuk this. God's told Habakkuk, Babylon is coming. It's only a matter of time. But what God is now going to clue Habakkuk in on is, even though I'm going to use Babylon to judge you guys, even though I'm going to use them to bring you down, one day I'm going to bring Babylon to justice as well. One day they are going to have to answer for their own wickedness. And just because God is using a corrupt nation like Babylon right now to judge Judah does not mean that he's going to endorse everything that they do. God's not saying, I agree with Babylon, I agree with their practices, I agree with their ways, therefore, that's not what is happening here. God is working with what he has, and ultimately, as we're going to see, God is going to hold all peoples and all nations accountable. Everyone is going to be held accountable to God, and Babylon is going to fall just like any other nation that acts like the ways that they do. And so God now is going to kind of elaborate this promise to Habakkuk, this promise to bring Babylon down with a series of 5 woes. So we kind of see this throughout the text. Woe to them, woe to him. And essentially a woe is it's this prophetic device. We see it throughout the prophetic books in the Old Testament a lot. It's this prophetic device that exposes a sin. It exposes a sin that someone has done, and then it declares a judgment on that sin. And so essentially God is going to tell Habakkuk, look, I see the wickedness in Babylon. I see all of the things that they have done wrong. I see all of this. I know this is true. I'm going to call them out on it. And again, you don't need to worry. Just because they are going to be used to judge you, they will be judged for their sin as well. And that should be good news to Habakkuk. And so this is, if we go back to part of our passage last week, where God comes to Habakkuk and tells Habakkuk to write this vision down and share this essentially with everybody. This is the vision that God has given to Habakkuk to write down. I want you to write this down and share it with everybody so that when you tell them, hey, Babylon is coming and they're going to wipe us out as part of God's judgment against us, the good news for them is, but that's not the end of the story, because God's also going to hold Babylon accountable. They will also experience judgment, because anybody who sins against God will be judged for their sin. And so God gives this to Habakkuk. He assures Habakkuk that he will hold Babylon accountable for all of their sins as a nation. So verse 6, won't all of these take up a taunt against him with mockery and riddles about him? So again, on that day, the day that God holds Babylon accountable, the day that God judges Babylon, all of the nations that Babylon had once imposed its imperial might on, they will be the ones that get the last laugh, right? They will taunt, they will mock, they will ridicule. It's kind of this classic, oh, how the mighty have fallen situation, where Babylon might be high and mighty now, they might be the ones reigning supreme, they might be the ones in charge, but one day they're going to be the laughingstock of all of the other nations when they get judged for the very things that you guys are getting judged for right now. And so these woes, all right, as we move into them, I think as we read them, we need to be careful not just to read them as God's judgment against Babylon, okay? Because God's going to call them out on some particular sins. But what I think God is really doing here, he's not just calling out Babylon for their sin. He's really, I think at its core, he's really describing the universal condition of the sinful human heart. Because we read through these things, these are sins that God's not just condemning for Babylon having done 2,500 years ago. These are things that we do every single day. And if God is going to condemn Babylon for doing these things, if he's going to hold them accountable for doing these things, then I think we need to examine our own hearts as we read through them. And we need to say, how am I guilty of these things as well? Am I guilty of the same things that Babylon is guilty of? And if God's going to hold Babylon accountable, why should I think that I'm not any different? We really need to take some time to examine our own hearts as we go through them. So the first woe, right there in the middle of verse 6. Woe to him who amasses what is not his, how much longer? And loads himself with goods taken in pledge. Won't your creditors suddenly arise, and those who disturb you wake up? Then you will become spoil for them, since you have plundered many nations. All the peoples who remain will plunder you because of human bloodshed and violence against lands, cities, and all who live in them. And so this first woe, it really criticizes Babylon for having taken wealth that does not belong to them. Woe to him who amasses what is not his. And as a result, essentially what God is saying, as a result, the day is going to come when the nations from whom Babylon has taken things from, they are going to come to rightly collect what is theirs. And so we need to be careful, because it seems like God is kind of condemning wealth here, which he is, but he's not saying wealth as a whole is bad, or it's not that having wealth that's wrong. It's about how they got their wealth. The way that they amassed what they have is wrong, because they plundered, they took what did not belong to them. That is what they are being condemned of. They've gone out, and just because they are strong, because they are more powerful, because they've got the bigger army, because they've got the willpower to do it, they just went and they took what did not belong to them, and they amassed it for themselves. And God's saying one day the tables are going to turn. One day the tables are going to turn. And what this does is, I think it ultimately reveals and it exposes the emptiness of the human heart as a whole, but both their hearts and our hearts as well. Right? Our hearts are empty. We feel an emptiness inside of us, and so we try to fill it with stuff. And so I feel lonely, I feel depressed, I feel unsatisfied, and so I need to find something that's going to fill that void. And so we see things that other people have, we see things that seem to make other people happy, and we think, well, if I have that, then that's going to make me happy. And this is what the Babylonians are doing. These people are living in this city over there, and they seem really happy, and if I take that city for myself, then I'll be happy. But what happens to the Babylonians? They take, and it doesn't satisfy. So they take more, and they take more, and they take more, and they take more, and they still feel this emptiness inside. And I think that's true of a lot of us as well, where we a lot of times experience this emptiness. We have this void inside of us, and we're like, if I just have this one thing, then I will be content, then I will be happy, then I will be satisfied. And so we see things that other people have that seem to make them happy, and so we take, hoping that it's going to fill our empty hearts. And the problem is that it's never enough. It's never going to be enough. And so again, whether you've got $1 in your bank account or $1 million in your bank account, it's never enough. We want more. And if we think that having more is going to make us happy, it's not. It's not going to satisfy. And so God is pronouncing this woe, not just on the outward act of plundering cities like the Babylonians are doing, but he's really pronouncing this woe on the greed of the heart of the person, that despite what God has given you, you want more. You want more. Be content with what you have, and recognize that you have everything that you need. You have everything that you could ever possibly need in Christ and what he has done, not in the things that we think make us happy. The second woe, verse 9, woe to him who dishonestly makes wealth for his house, to place his nest on high, to escape the grasp of disaster. You have planned shame for your house by wiping out many peoples and sinning against your own self, for the stones will cry out from the wall and the rafters will answer them from the woodwork. And so this woe is, it's similar to the first, right? The first woe, or the first one kind of dealt with the unjust economic practices of the Babylonians. And this one is similar, but this one, it's they're taking things that don't belong to them, and then they're using that ill-gotten wealth to build security for themselves. So the more I have, the more secure I feel. The more protected I feel. And so they've exploited others, and we even see that they've dishonestly made wealth to place his nest on high. Like an eagle who builds its nest on the highest tree away from any predators, the Babylonians are taking things that don't belong to them because they think by having more, they will have security. By having more, then they will be safe. And so again, they've exploited others. They've took wealth through force. They've took wealth through fraud. But all of the success that they've gained from what they've taken, it didn't really actually lead to the security that they thought it would. Right? It did not bring the safety that they hoped for, and it never does. And so again, we need to be careful. We need to be careful as we amass money, right? Hopefully you are growing in wealth. Hopefully you are getting the promotions that you aspire for. As we amass money and wealth and power, do we think that the more that we have will provide safety and security that we desperately want? Right? Is having the right job, is that going to make you secure in life? Is getting the promotion that you have your eyes on, is that going to make you secure? Is having the right amount of money in your bank account? Is having the right home and the right stuff inside? Is having all of this going to make you feel that safety and security? That is a good thing that we should aspire to have, but is getting more stuff really going to bring that? And what God is saying is it's not. Getting more stuff is not going to make you feel safe and secure. Because what's going to happen at the end of the day if we lose all of the stuff that we've gathered for ourselves? What are we left with? You're left with nothing, right? You're left with nothing. And so this is like that foolish man who builds his house on the sand, right? When we lose it, when the waters come and wash it away, what is he left with? He's left with nothing. He has nothing. And verse 11 really clues us in, right? If we build on our own, then the end, everything that we've built, everything is going to cry out against you, right? Look at verse 11 again. For the stones will cry out from the wall, and the rafters will answer them from the woodwork. And so again, at the end of your life, if you've placed all of your security in what you have, then essentially all of your stuff is going to cry out against you. What do you have now? Right? We're still here. Where are you at? Everything that you pour your life into is going to cry out against you, because unless the Lord builds his house, then those who labor in it labor in vain. But again, going back to that story, right? If we build our house on the rock, if we build our house on the foundation of God, if God is our security, if God is our foundation, then even if the house falls, what are we left with? You still got God. You've still got God. And so in God, we have everything that we need. In God, God is our security. God is our foundation. And so again, woe to the one who thinks just having a bunch of stuff is going to make you secure in life. Third woe, verse 12. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and founds a town with injustice. Is it not from the Lord of armies that the peoples labor only to fuel the fire, and countries exhaust themselves for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord's glory as the water covers the sea. And so this third woe, it's a critique of the slave labor that was employed by the Babylonians to kind of build their cities, right? And so the Babylonians, classically, as they plundered cities, as they captured cities, they would take the inhabitants of these cities as slaves, and they would essentially treat these humans like animals. And they would force them to build stuff for them. And as I'm sure that you're aware, when a civilization is built on a foundation of violence and injustice, it's already sown the seeds of its own destruction. If that is how you are building things, it's not going to end well for you. Eventually, God's going to cause the forced labor of the oppressed to become the fuel for the fire that's going to burn down the Babylonians. And ultimately, God's going to put his glory on display, and the earth will be filled with his glory when he brings down the Babylonians. So essentially, God is saying, you've built your entire civilization upon the forced labor of others. That's not good. That's not good. And one day, when your civilization crumbles, and the voices of those that you have oppressed that have been crying out against you, when they are crying out because of this, you're going to be nothing, but God's going to have everything. And so kind of really, as we think about this, well, it really calls us to examine not just what we are building, but how we are building it. Again, is it wrong to build? Was it wrong for the Babylonians to build cities for themselves? I mean, not necessarily, not inherently, but it was how they built it. It was how they went about it. So again, it's not just what you're building, it's how you're building. It doesn't matter how big it is, how beautiful it is, how nice it is. It's how you build it. And we might be tempted, because my guess is none of us have ever employed slave labor in here. We've never committed violence and shed blood of others in order to build what we want. But again, as we've built our homes, as we've built our businesses, as we've built our lives, as we have built, are we building at the expense of others? Who have we taken advantage of? Who have we neglected? In what ways have we neglected? How many family dinners have you missed because you had to work late? It's not just about what you're building, it's how you're building it. And I think some of us might need to take an honest look at what we are building and really ask ourselves, what value is this to God? What does God care most about? Like, at the end of the day, does he care how profitable my business is? Does he care how many employees I have underneath me? Does he care about that if you've neglected things that he actually cares about, things in his kingdom? If you've neglected your family, if you've neglected your friends, if you've neglected your church? It's not just what you are building, it's how you're building it. Fourth woe, verse 15. Woe to him who gives his neighbors drink, pouring out your wrath and even making them drunk in order to look at their nakedness. You will be filled with disgrace instead of glory. You also drink and expose your uncircumcision. The cup in the Lord's right hand will come around to you, and utter disgrace will cover your glory. For your violence against Lebanon will overwhelm you. The destruction of animals will terrify you because of your human bloodshed and violence against lands, cities, and all who live in them. And so this fourth woe really reveals the kind of predatory nature of the Babylonians. And so in all of their imperial ambitions, right, they had their eyes set on way more than what they had. We want more. And in all of this, one of the practices that they employed to get what they want is they would go in And they would essentially get the inhabitants of these cities drunk. And then in their drunkenness, they would take advantage of them and they would take these things that did not belong to them. And essentially what God is saying is, because you have done that, because you have ravaged and you've systematically stripped away everything of value from these other people, because you have essentially unethically employed these practices against them, then one day this is going to come upon you, right? You've used shame of other people to your glory. They've used the shame brought upon the drunkenness of others and used it to their glory. And essentially God is saying, I'm going to turn your glory, and I'm essentially going to turn things upside down on you, and I'm going to bring you to shame. You are going to become drunk, and you will be exposed in the same way that you have done to others. And just like you have sought to pour out the cup of your wrath against these other nations, you are now going to experience the cup of God's wrath poured out against you. You will be judged. And again, even though God is using them as a tool to judge other nations, you will be judged as well. You will be judged for all of the bloodshed and the violence and the shame that you have been responsible for. And so again, I think we need to be careful. We need to examine our hearts here. And we need to make sure that we are not reducing down the image of God in others to something that is usable, consumable, and disposable for our own pleasure. Right? If you think less of somebody and you're willing to shame them to further yourself, if they are consumable to you, if they are disposable, then we're just as guilty as the Babylonians are. And so we need to make sure that we're not using our positions of power and our influence to take advantage of others and to prey on others when they are in positions of vulnerability. And we need to especially make sure that we are not the ones making them vulnerable in the first place. Woe to that person. Woe to that person. The fifth woe, verse 18. What use is a carved idol after its craftsman carves it? It is only a cast image, a teacher of lies. For the one who crafts its shape trusts in it and makes worthless idols that cannot speak. Woe to him who says to wood, wake up, or to a mute stone, come alive. Can it teach? Look, it may be plated with gold and silver, yet there is no breath in it at all. So this fifth woe really exposes the idolatry driving nations like Babylon. And in a sense, this is what every single other woe was pointing to. The reason that the Babylonians are guilty of all of the other things that they are doing is because of their idolatry. It's because of what they worship. And the Babylonians were known for their idol worship. They were known for it. They were known for their gods. They were known for their temples. They were known for their sacrifice. But this will really exposes the reality of idols and idol worship. Because what are idols? Right? Idols, they're nothing more than a creation of the human mind. They're nothing more than carved images, human creations, carved out of, again, as he says, wood, stone, or metal. And the only thing that they do is represent a god, a lowercase g god, that doesn't actually exist. And so we're kind of presented with this rhetorical question in verse 18. What use is a carved idol after its craftsman carves it? What use is it? Nothing. It's of no use, right? Verse 19, it can't move, it can't speak, it can't breathe, they can't do anything. So what is the point of these man-made things? And so we need to really, again, we need to value what are the idols in our lives? What are the man-made things that we have created that we have turned into an idol? And Tim Keller once said that an idol, this is how he defines it, an idol is anything more fundamental than God to your happiness, meaning, and identity. Anything more fundamental than God to your happiness, meaning, and identity. And so again, think about this. What are the things in your life that you could not imagine your life without? What if taken from you, would you feel like that you lost everything? Or what is the thing that if I had this, then I would be happy? That is your God. That is your God. That is your idol. But as God says, it's nothing more than a man-made creation, and it's nothing more than a teacher of lies. A teacher of lies. And so the idol worshiper, whatever you worship more than God, whatever you give more of your time, your attention, your energy, whatever it is that you are worshiping, You're being taught lies by this thing. You're becoming blind to your idolatry, and you're being taught by your idol that if you have wealth, if you have power, if you have pleasure, if you get everything that you think you need, then you're good. But that's a lie. That's a lie. That's nothing more than a fantasy. That's not reality. You don't actually have what you need. You don't actually have wealth. You don't actually have power. You don't actually have pleasure in its truest sense. And so essentially what God is saying is Babylon has become blinded by its own idolatry. And many of us, I think, have as well. Many of us have become blinded to these dead things in our life, these things that we have made, these things that can't speak, can't talk, can't breathe, can't do anything. We've become blinded by them, thinking that these dead things are going to give us life. They don't, and they never will. And verse 20 shows us this contrast between these false gods, between these idols that we have created and the one true God. But the Lord, in contrast to all of these idols, the Lord is in his holy temple. Let the whole earth be silent in his presence. So again, in contrast to these false gods is the one true God, who is not mute, he is not dumb, he is not deaf, he is not powerless, he is living, and he's enthroned in his temple. And he's reigning over the entire universe that he created. He's sovereign, he's in control, and he's over all things. And he's even in control, even when everything and everyone seems to be out of control, which in Habakkuk's life is exactly what's happening. And this is what God is trying to assure Habakkuk of. Is Habakkuk, I know things seem out of control right now. I know things seem unfair. I know things seem like nothing is going the way that it should. I know it seems like I'm not in control, but I assure you, again, I am in control over all of this. I am in control even when it seems like I am not. And what our response should be to this sovereign God is exactly what he says there in verse 20. It should be to sit in silence. Sit in silence. Sit in silent reverence before his holy presence. Why? Why is that our response? Because when the living God, not these false gods, not these fake gods, when the living God appears, revealing who he really is and exposing who we really are, exposing the sinful nature of our hearts, there's nothing else to do. There's nothing else to say. We can't say or do anything, and so we are silent. Silent before this God. Not because we're hopeless, not because, can't do anything. I'm without hope. No, it's just the opposite. We're filled with hope because we silently watch what no idol could ever do for us, but it's exactly what God does when he shows up, and it's to save us. This is what God does where no other idol, no other false god has ever done, is he saved us. And so what these woes do, right, they should expose the sinfulness of every single one of us. And what does God say in response to that? Well, try harder. Do more. Stop it. I mean, you should stop it, but that's not what he says here. He doesn't say do more, try harder, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. No. He says just sit. Just sit and be silent. And watch me do what you could never do for yourself. God requires nothing from us. And the reason God requires nothing from us other than to just sit and be silent is because he required everything from Jesus. At the cross, Jesus bore all of our woes. Every single one of our woes, every single sin that we are being judged for, Jesus took that on. And he calls us, in response to that, he calls us out of our life of darkness, out of our life of sinfulness, out of our life of rebellion, out of our life of wickedness, and he calls us into his marvelous light. He calls us to leave our life behind, again, not because we had the power to do that on our own, but because he empowered us to do it through his life and through his death. Jesus says, do nothing. Watch me do everything. I will deal with all of the sin that you should have to deal with because I know that you can't do it. And this last verse, it really serves as a reminder to Habakkuk and to us, God has not left us. God did not leave Habakkuk. Did God leave Habakkuk hanging? Did God leave Habakkuk wondering? Did God respond immediately to everything that Habakkuk asked? Sure he did, right? But God did not leave him. He did not abandon him. He did not forsake him. He is still with him. Even when God seems to be silent, his silence should not be mistaken for abandonment. Because ultimately, God is going to fight our battles. And he is going to judge sin. But we don't have to pay the penalty for that sin. He pays it. And he offers us his life in exchange for our sinfulness. And even when we're still in the midst of our uncertainty, even when we're still in the midst of our hard times, even when we still have the questions, even when we're still wrestling with all of these things, even when we don't understand what God is doing it and why he's doing it and what time he's doing it, he has not abandoned us. He's just waiting to fulfill his purposes at his appointed time. So we can wait. We can trust God. We can live by faith, knowing that in God's time, he is going to do everything that he says he is going to do. He is going to judge the sin of every single person. And ultimately, especially for Habakkuk, he did that by dying himself. And so for us who are in that time, if you're in that time of uncertainty, if you're in that time of why God, right? If that's the question that's on your mind right now, we don't have to look forward to when God is going to deal with sin. God's already dealt with sin for us. We get to look back on the promise that God has already kept, and that is our assurance. That is how we live by faith. And so that should be good news for us. Let's pray. God, we thank you for this day. Even on days where our sinfulness is uncovered, when we have to wrestle with the reality of our depravity, when we have to wrestle with how we have fallen short before a good and holy and perfect God. The bad news is always met with the good news. Even when we are presented with the bad news, the reality of our sinfulness, we are also presented with the good news of a God who loved us so much that he sent his son to die for us, who lived that perfect life, who died that sinner's death, and then who demonstrated his power by rising from the grave to give us life, to gift it to us freely. Not because of anything that we deserved, because we do not. And so just help us, God. Help us to understand the areas in our life where we fall short. Help us to understand the areas in our life where we are guilty. We're guilty of seeking wealth and seeking pleasure and seeking power and making other things more important than you, God, because there's nothing more important than you. You are everything. You are everything, and in you we have everything. And so help us to grab hold of that. And even when things in our life seem to be out of place, when things seem to be missing, when we don't have everything that we think we should have, God, we know that we have you, and that is all we need. You are everything that we need for everlasting joy in this life. So help us to cling to that joy that we have in you. And even on our darkest of days, even on our hardest of days, even when we don't understand, even when we cry out, why, God? We still have you. We still have you because you gave your life for us. And so we thank you for that. We thank you for dying for us when we did not deserve it. We thank you for gifting us with your Spirit to help lead us and guide us and direct us in all the things that we do. And just help us every single day to trust in you more as we wait. As we wait. It's in Jesus' name we pray.